Thank you very much, Corey. Thank you very much to all of the hosts and to those that organized this really wonderful recognition ceremony. I want to pass along my congratulations to all the awardees. I apologize for interrupting the flow of the event, but as you've probably heard, there are busy times down the street of the United States Capitol, and so we have a vote this evening on a very important piece of legislation that I sponsored. Of course, we're getting ready for the transition at the beginning of next year. I jumped at the opportunity to be able to come by and say a few words of thanks to those of you who are assembled here today. The fact of the matter is that the world today has a panoply of diverse threats that would be unrecognizable 50 or 100 years ago. There are still always the threat of nation states warring against each other, compounded now by the potential for terrorist attack, compounded now by the threat of climate change, compounded now by the insidiousness of global poverty and disease still sweeping over grand portions of this world. Well, we do believe that the United States, through the appropriation of funds for our foreign assistance budget, can make a big difference. We know that in the end, it can be matched, if not exceeded, by the generosity of individual people who decide to go out there and make it their mission to volunteer, to give a bit of themselves. I think about this through the lens of volunteers from Connecticut who have served around the globe. I think about somebody like Chris Lawton, who hails from northern Connecticut in Enfield. Chris went down to Haiti, and he's a specialist in modern agricultural practices, how to get the biggest yield for a small investment, how to take that small investment and make sure you're getting safe food from your harvest. And he went down to Haiti and trained about 48 different people, primarily those involved in direct agriculture. And those 48 people went out and trained another, I think, 160. And so the impact of just Chris's work was in the hundreds. Alan Carters is a bank executive in Hartford working for Bank of America. And he started to realize how much bigger an impact he could have than just getting loans to small businesses in Hartford. And he picked up his expertise and went to Tanzania. And he helped the Tanzanian bank figure out how you can structure risks so that you can get more help and aid and funding to small businesses, in particular women-owned small businesses who sometimes didn't even know how to ask for assistance. And so part of what he could help with was the outreach that sometimes doesn't happen. Or actually my personal friend, Giancarlo Casa, who I've known for years and years. He's had a bunch of different jobs in Connecticut, but his latest is with the governor's office, helping to set budget and policy for the state of Connecticut. Well, given his years of expertise in and around state government in Connecticut, he got drafted to go volunteer in Tunisia, as Tunisia was setting up their democracy, the only in the region. Giancarlo said, listen, I can help the Ministry of Finance figure out how you run a country in a transparent way, set up the initial systems by which you can set a budget in a way that ordinary people can understand, look at, see. Something we take for granted, but it is awful hard when you're starting from square one. And so those are just 3 people in Connecticut who have made a tremendous difference. And so close to home, I know what a difference you all are making because I know these people and I know what they've done. But as Corey mentioned, I'm trying to start a conversation here in the United States Congress about what American foreign policy should be going forward, learning the lessons of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, one in my mind that should have never been fought, one in my mind that should have been fought but was mismanaged from the start. How do you square wanting to be an internationalist, wanting to be someone who really does feel that the United States can play a proactive role for good in the world, while also trying to learn these lessons over the course of the last 15 years? Last year, I think, I put out a document with 2 other of my colleagues outlining principles for a progressive foreign policy. and suggesting that today the United States is badly mis-resourced to try to meet all these challenges that I laid out at the outset. Well, we still have the biggest, baddest military in the world. That military doesn't really help you confront the threat of climate change. That military doesn't do much to try to lift people up out of poverty. That military doesn't really do much to try to win the hearts and minds of individuals who live in regions where there are a lot more suitors for attention than back when it was just the United States and the Soviet Union. So we live in a very different world today in which we need more tools in our toolkit. So we made the argument that we need more support for foreign aid, that we need more support for economic development assistance, that we need more support for energy assistance, that we've got to tackle corruption all around the world, not just as something that's written into State Department documents, but that's actually funded at a robust level that shows that we are not just talking the talk, but walking the walk. And maybe we have to step back and reconsider whether as a country we think it's okay that there are today more members of military bands in the United States than there are diplomats at the US State Department. Maybe the 20-to-1 ratio of military funding from the United States Congress for non-military funding going to USAID and the State Department isn't the right ratio, given the sort of asymmetric set of threats that face this world. And if you really want to start building this response to global challenges that understands that oftentimes it's not the point of the sword that makes the biggest difference, well then I have to admit that we are never going to get back to where we were when it came to the funding for those kind of projects. In 1950, the United States was spending 3% of our entire gross domestic product on non-military assistance, right? The Marshall Plan and other commitments that look like it around the world. Today, the United States is spending 0.1% of its GDP on foreign aid. 3% to 0.1%, a 95% diminution. And so I know we're never getting back to 3%. But if we're ever going to be able to do the kind of things that we used to do with respect to building open democracies, building open economies, then we're going to have to rely on volunteers who, of course, fit into the missions that are funded by USAID, State Department, and our partners all around the globe, but who can leverage your time and your generosity in a way that we can't always pay for at the level we'd like to coming out of the federal government. I think that we have a tremendous deficit of these non-military interventions. And if we're really going to be true about how we get there, it's going to be a partnership. It's going to be growing resources, hopefully allocated by a more forward-thinking United States Congress, partnered together with the individual efforts of people in this room. And if Chris Lawton could have an impact that stretched to over 200 people in Haiti, if we were able to plus up the budget along the lines of what we're asking for, those of us who believe in this progressive foreign policy, and double the number of volunteers that are out there partnering with our work, then there's no limit to the good that we can do. And strictly from an American perspective, thinking about the Americans that are out there volunteering, it's also part and parcel of our national security strategy in that we are in a contest of ideologies. We are in a world in which we have to sometimes make up for the face that is put on American foreign policy by these mismanaged and disastrous wars. That there are ways in which individual U.S. citizens can correct for some of the misimpressions that people have about the United States, or some of the impressions that are correct due to mistakes we've made that have no price on it. So I argue that having Americans forward deployed volunteers around the world, boy, it's one of the most important things that we can do to sell ourselves. And of course, I'd say the same thing for other countries that are investing in volunteerism as well. I came to the Congress in 2006 running on a platform of opposition to the Iraq War. But I am an internationalist. I am someone who believes that this country can play a role for good in the world. And I believe that because I've seen the difference that volunteers coming from my state have made. And I know that properly resourced and properly partnered with organizations like USAID, there really is no limit to the good that all of you and all of those that are not here with us today, other volunteers from around the world, can do as well. So I'm very, very proud of all of the awardees here today. I'm really honored to be able to say a few words. I'm looking forward to continue to cooperate with you to a safer, more generous world that we live in. Thank you, everyone, for having me.